Hi, my name is Dawson, and my dad died. My dad died on June 23rd, 2019, from complications of diabetes. He was 42 years old, and he was found by his mother, my grandmother. My dad has always been taken care of by my grandma. When my dad was diagnosed with diabetes type 1, back when he was around 12 or 13, my grandmother made sure that he always had eyes on him, took care of him till the day he died. And I thank my grandma for her years of service because it was hard. My dad didn't take care of himself the way he should have. He didn't test his sugar, he didn't watch what he ate, and he just didn't take care of himself like a diabetes, like a person with diabetes should. What happened to my dad was no one's fault, unless you count the faults of his own. I miss my dad a lot. I do. But we also had a really rocky relationship. Um, my dad and I have always been opposites. He wasn't abusive towards me. He didn't hit me necessarily, but when it came to yelling and the likes of that, I definitely got my fair share. My dad, I don't feel like was ever prepared to be a father. When he had my oldest sister, he was like 15 years old. And then he had my second sister when he was 17, and then had me when he was 21, I believe is where it goes. And though he had two other children before me, one he had lost contact with. So I never got to meet my the middle child, my second oldest sister, or my, you know what I mean, the middle child, until I was around 14 or 15 years old. Maybe a little bit younger, 13 or 14. Though my dad was a teen dad, and though he had two children before me, he just was never a dad. He just never learned how. It never clicked with him like it clicked with our moms. Me and my sister's moms. My dad has had all of his children are with different mothers, which doesn't bother me at all. Um, they're still my sisters no matter what. My dad was just never prepared for life, I don't think. And thus, it was really, really hard to relate to him, because I feel like for my age, at 21 years old, as of 2 or 3 days ago, I feel like I was leaps and bounds ahead in maturity wise than my own father. And that was hard. My dad was a good man. He had good values, as, one should have, but he had his own demons. He had problems with anger. And that was hard for a lot of people, and including himself, because I feel like he let his anger get in the way of his health at times. My dad's sugar would always bottom out, always, without fail. Sometimes we could get it under control, and sometimes it was a hospital visit in the ambulance. My dad had neuropathy in both legs, and he was going blind. My dad had a lot of problems, and I told myself years ago that I knew I was going to lose my dad young. Whether or not I was young at the time or he was young, I knew I was going to lose him young. But nothing ever truly prepares you for hearing the words, "Your dad died." Sometimes you have prep. Sometimes there's an underlying disease, that takes a while to get cancer, or even in his case diabetes, that you can tell that their time is running up, so you kind of have time to prepare and to truly understand the meaning that they are leaving. I didn't have that. I had just talked to my dad a couple days prior, and he was doing fine. The last conversation I had with my dad, he told me to call him back. I was asking where my grandma was. She was out and about doing errands. He told me to ask her or call her and ask if she would like to stop by my house. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And he said, okay, call me back after you're done. And when I called my grandma, she told me that she had stuff that needed to get into the refrigerator. So she would just call me when she gets back. Okay, cool. So I didn't call my dad back. I didn't call him back because I assumed that once my grandma got home, I would be able to talk to him then. But when my grandma called, my dad was gone. I don't regret not calling my dad back. I feel like when it comes to people's regrets, they regret the final conversations. They regret not being able to say goodbye. When in actuality, you never truly know when is the time that you will say your final goodbye. If I know someone is going, whether it be a family pet or a family member, I don't like saying goodbye. I don't. I just say I'll see you later. When my grandpa died 2 years ago, which was my dad's dad, I knew that I wouldn't see him again. And I told him, all right, old man, I'll see you later. And the next morning he had passed. I knew I wouldn't see him. I knew this was my final goodbye. But I don't like saying that because, especially in those moments, it makes it feel too real. We know it's happening. So why say it? So I don't regret that. I don't regret my final conversations with my dad. The previous conversation me and my dad had, I also don't regret. It was a good conversation. We were talking about my middle sister, and now him and her had kind of lost contact for a while. Again, didn't really talk. And we just talked about that. We talked about my own life, about him and his health, and about he was getting ready for eye surgery, which he did have before his passing. He had eye surgery, trying to correct some things and trying to stop the process of his vision loss. And it was a good conversation. It was. And we ended off the call, I think, better than when it started. And that's always what you try to do. And I don't regret my final moments with my dad. I don't. A week prior to his death, I went over a week and a half prior to his death. I went over to my grandmother's house. My dad lived with my grandma. My dad has never really had a proper job, and because of his neuropathy and because his loss of vision, he was put on what's it called? He was put on the government monthly income. I can't remember what it's called right now. Social Security. And he's lived with his mom basically his entire life, on and off. So I went over to their house. My grandmother had just gotten a new Blu-ray player. She wanted to know how to use it. I hadn't seen them in a while, so I wanted to go over and hang out. And the thing that strikes me of that day was my dad, when I first got there, was sleeping on the couch. My dad could not get comfortable in bed. He would jump from the bed to the couch to the chair to the couch to the chair to the bed. He would just jump all over the place. He just wasn't a good sleeper. So he usually slept fairly late into the afternoon. So I got there around maybe 11, and my dad was still sleeping there on the couch. And after about a half hour, he had woken up and doing stuff and yada, yada, yada. And my grandmother's Blu-ray player was hooked up. I showed her how to use it, signed her up with a Netflix account. When my grandpa passed away 2 years ago, I made a disc that had a bunch of pictures of him on it and music going alongside of it. It was his little memorial video. And we popped that in the player and we watched it. And my grandma was sitting on the right side of the couch, and my dad was laying down almost in her lap, his head almost in her lap. And I looked at there and I was like, it's a very nice sight, I suppose. It was very sweet. So I thought, when my dad is gone, this is going to be a photo that I think my grandma would really appreciate. Watching them two laying there, watching my grandpa's memorial video. So I took a picture, not knowing that that's the last picture that I would ever take of my dad. And in my mind, I took it because I knew it would be a nice memory for my grandma when my dad inevitably passed away. One thing I wanted to do that day, and I didn't get a chance to do, was I wanted to take new pictures of me and my dad. Whether it be my grandma or me, I wanted to take a couple pictures because the last pictures me and my dad had together, not just us alone, but together in the same photo, was around 2 years ago before my grandpa passed away. That summer that that summer before my grandpa passed away was the last photos that I have of me and my dad just together. So I wanted to take more. And in my head, I thought that, okay, I would like to do that, fine, yada, 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 and it slipped my mind. And only after the fact, when I left, I remembered, I wanted to take pictures with Dad. I'll do that next time I see him. Now, do I regret that? No, I don't. I have a few pictures with my dad, mostly when I was younger, but I do have a handful of pictures of me and him together as I've gotten older. But it's just the fact of the matter that it happened, and I can't change that. I think what I want to do with these set of videos is to tell you that it's okay to not grieve heavily. Just because it's my parent, it's my dad, and I loved him dearly. I did. Our last few years were better than I could have ever expected because honestly, there were times where I was done with my dad. Done. I told my mom, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to see him. I don't want anything to do with him. But I kept going back. Whether it was because of my own stupidity or my own hard-headedness, I kept going back because I thought things could change. And eventually, as the years went on and I got older, they did. They got better. They weren't perfect, but when me and my dad would see each other or talk, there was no arguing. There was no bad things being said towards each other. It was just, hey, buddy, how's it going? Hey, Dad, how you doing? It was good. Better than I could have asked for. So I can't regret all the years prior that I might have missed, a few months here and there because I was mad at him. I can't be mad at him because I now have anxiety because of the hours and hours I would sit there in fear of him yelling or being mad at me or blaming me for something. I can't do that anymore. I know my dad regrets those things. I know he does. He's told me plenty of times, and he's told other people. that he regrets the things he did when he was raising us. So with his regret, I feel that I can't have any. And I shouldn't have any. Because the things that happened between me and him were not my fault. They weren't. They were his. And I also know that in his mind and in his heart, he resolved those problems. Which I'm okay with. I don't know how my siblings feel. I don't know how my family feels about that, but I'm okay. I turned out fine, I think. I think I turned out a pretty stand-up guy. When it comes to folks saying they're sorry, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry I heard about your dad. How are you doing? Those sentimental words get really old. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm not angry when I hear them. I'm not upset. I don't hate the person because they asked. I just wish for the few initial moments I have with a person, they don't immediately have to bring up my dad. Because usually when you go up to somebody, like a family member, and you haven't seen him in a while, you say, "Oh, hey, Mark, how you doing? How's life been?" And then you let them tell you. But when you have somebody pass away in your life, especially someone like your dad, you don't get that luxury of telling somebody how you feel. Because it usually goes like this. "Oh, hey, Dawson, man, I'm so sorry about your loss. How you doing?" And that gets really old. I appreciate it. I do. I do. I really, really do. I really appreciate everyone who has reached out and sent their condolences. But sometimes it just becomes too much. Because I'm fine. I'm sad, but I'm fine. And some people, and this is a complete human reaction, completely understandable because I have done this before too. When I hear somebody when I hear that somebody has lost someone, my first reaction is, how would I feel if that would have happened to me? Your grandma died? Oh my God, I can't imagine my grandma dying. I am so sorry for your loss. I hope you get through this. Yada yada yada. Maybe they weren't close to their grandma. Maybe their grandma was mean to them. Maybe they never met their grandma. Maybe they haven't seen their grandma in a long time. There are plenty of things that could be. They could have loved their grandma, went there every weekend, couldn't wait to go there on Christmas. That could also be the case. But the fact of the matter is, you don't know. But your initial reaction is, "Oh my God, I would be devastated if I lost A, B, or C. So I'm going to treat this as if they are me." That's just not the way. When I told one of my buddies that, "You know what? Hey, this morning my dad died," his reaction, I feel like, was the best. "Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. Were you guys close?" He allowed me to tell him how to react. And that was nice. That was really, really nice and eye-opening. It made me feel like, you know what? Me and my dad had our differences. There were times where we were closer than others, but for the most part, we were very different people, and our time together was fairly limited. And I was able to tell him that. I love my dad. I'm going to miss him very much so. But no, we weren't close. We just weren't. And he knew that. I think that he wanted us to be closer, but because of years and years and years of stuff that I don't I don't hold grudges against him toward or for, I don't, but the damage had been done and I didn't feel like I needed to be his best friend. You know, I had a grandfather who I lived with who raised me. So I didn't necessarily need that fatherly figure from him. I just didn't, and I don't think even towards his later life, that he could have provided that. He just couldn't have. So I never asked that from him because I knew that it would just be too much to ask for. And also, I grew up. I'm not in my 30s, but I'm 21 years old. I have grown up without my father being a main part of my life, being a fatherly figure, and I'm okay with that. At this point in my life, my mother has been the best support system in my life, the greatest that I could have ever asked for. And the support system that she has built around me has been nothing short of amazing. It's okay to not be sad. It's okay to not feel like you are devastated, that you need to act more upset because that's your dad or that's your mom or that's your grandma or that's your sister or brother or aunt or grandpa or whoever it is. If they aren't true feelings, then don't act like they are, because all you're going to do is gather sympathy that you don't need, that could actually go towards somebody who needs it. Because people in my life, like my grandmother and my uncle and my sisters, they are dealing with it harder than I am. And that's okay. I'm here for them. I talk to my grandma almost every day. I had a call with my sister last night. They're dealing with it much harder than I am. So instead of gathering sympathy from others to help myself, which I don't need, I choose to be okay and to be a voice of reason and to be a voice of sympathy for those who need it. My grandmother, in 2 years, have lost her husband back in 2017, her sister in early 2019, and then her son in the mid 2019, a few months later. My grandma's household has went from 3 people to 1 in 2 years. That's hard. She is the toughest woman I know, because nobody should lose their baby. Nobody. Especially one that you've taken care of for 42 years. And my dad told her, Mom, I hope I go before you. I hope I die before you, because I couldn't lose you. And that's true. I believe that wholeheartedly. My dad could not have lived on if my grandma would have passed before him. Couldn't have. If my grandma died a week later, so would have my dad. They were life partners. They were attached at the hip. My grandma was my dad's entire world. She had saved his life more times than I could count. But now my grandma is living in her house alone because her husband died back in 2017 of basically lung failure, more or less. He had a lung transplant 11 years ago, or 11 or what was it now? 13 years ago, but 11 years ago to the year he passed, he had a lung transplant, and they gave him 5 years. He lived for 11, so he passed away, and then 2 years later, their son passes away, my dad, and that's hard. That's extremely hard. She took care of both of them, and now they're gone. And I can't imagine that. He's my dad, but that's her baby. That's her baby. And I couldn't imagine losing a child. A child, bar none, by far, is the worst loss you could ever have. Your child should never go before you. And my dad died at 42 years old because he didn't take care of himself. My grandma worked her ass off. And not for naught, without her, my dad would have died years ago. It's okay to be okay. I will miss my dad every day. I wish I could call my dad and just chat. How you doing, Dad? What you been up to? But I can't. That's okay. Because I know that my dad has been in pain for many, many years. And now wherever he is, I'm not a religious man, but wherever he is, whether it's nothing or something, I have this hope that my dad is no longer in pain. That he is just happy. Because I don't feel like life provided that for him. And that's just unfortunate. For those who have spoken out to me, I do appreciate it. I do. All the cards, all of the messages, I appreciate. I don't want you to feel like things that I've said in this mean any disrespect or make you feel like you shouldn't have done what you did. It's just hard to be constantly reminded that, oh, life must suck right now because your dad's dead. When in actuality, it doesn't. It doesn't suck. It's unfortunate. It's sad. It hurts. But it's not the end of the world. My dad's book is done. The last chapter is closed. And when his last chapter closes, all of our chapters open with the rest of our lives without my dad and without our son, our nephew, our friend, our brother, our uncle. All those chapters open. And for some, those chapters are harder to read. But for folks like me, I feel like I'm going to be okay. I'll have my hard moments. I'll have my days. But I know that I'm okay. I'm okay that my dad is gone. And I think that others should also be okay with it. Okay that I'm okay with it. Talk to me about something else. If I want to talk about it, I'll tell you. But don't feel like you have to bring it up. Because it's not necessary. You don't have to. It's not what I want to talk about all the time. It's not. If I bring it up, okay, let's talk about it. But if I don't, at the end of the conversation, when all is said and done and we're parting ways, just say, hey, I just wanted to ask you, how you doing? I'll know what you're talking about. I can say, I'm doing okay. Or I can say, it's rough, but I'm getting through it. And then we can part ways. It's easy, it's simple. Allow me to have that moment of time where I don't have to think about it. That I don't have to think that that's what you're thinking about. Fake it. Ask me how I'm doing. What movies have you watched lately? Did you see that video online? What have you been doing? Just simple stuff, catching up. And then when all is said and done, and all that's out of the way, and you allow me to be human for a few minutes with you, then you can ask, how you doing? Because then I feel like you genuinely care. Not saying that you don't, but I know how I am. And sometimes you don't want to be that person that doesn't say anything because you don't want them to think that you don't care. But sometimes saying nothing is better. And just being in someone's company, getting their mind off things is better. You don't have to ask how they're doing. You don't want to ask, you know, all those stereotypical questions. You don't need to ask them. Because if someone truly needs that help, they'll ask for it. They'll talk about it. They'll bring it up. But in the meantime, you don't need to. Because I'm sure it's already on their mind. And I'm sure what they talk about with another person, the things that they say, becomes a script. I know that the day my dad died, when I called close to a dozen people, the first couple were genuine, but after the third or fourth call, I felt like I was reciting a script, saying the same things over and over again, having the same conversations. It became so mundane that I was tired of talking about my dad. I was done. I didn't want to talk about it because I just got annoyed of it all. My dad's dead. I know. I get it. You have questions. We all have that morbid curiosity. But let's talk about something else. You know, and I don't want to be a dick. I don't want people to think that that's what this is about. It's not. It's just the fact of the matter is that my life after my dad's death does not become a life about my dad's death. It doesn't. The days keep on moving, the calendar keeps on going, and life moves on. And you can choose whether or not you